We'll now move to our research culture strand, which will begin with Tanita Casci from the University of Glasgow, talking about her university's work on long-term in changing the culture of research within an institution. Tanita is head of research policy at Glasgow, and she's responsible for delivering an institutional strategy across all academic disciplines, which includes developing policies and practices to enable academic staff and students to succeed in their research. She's been leading the university's research culture program since 2015, working to improve things for over 5,000 researchers, and is also very active in the research integrity field elsewhere. Tanita, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, James, and thank you to Alicia as well for all the backstage support. And hello, everybody else who is listening. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, hopefully that worked. Okay, so yes, as James said, we've been working at the University of Glasgow for about 5 or 6 years now to advance our research culture. And so this is going to be a pretty practical presentation. I'm not going to focus on the problems which we are all sort of aware of, and Ottoline has explained as well, but mainly on what practical solutions institutions can put in place. And so to some extent, this is an institutional case study, but hopefully I've deconstructed it in such a way that you can relate some of the initiatives that we've taken to what's going on in your institution, obviously dependent on the organisation you're in, the role you're in, and where you are in your plans for advancing research culture. As James said, I'm sort of responsible for the implementation of the research strategy across all of its remit, and if there's one thing the research strategy needs to do, it's to improve the quality of our research. And research culture does precisely that. It helps more people to do high quality research. And so culture is integral to the research strategy at the University of Glasgow and integral to my role. I'm the institutional co-lead for research culture, a role I share with Miles, who's listed here. Miles was the previous Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research, and with whom I conducted several of the activities that I'm going to be listing now. So trying to improve research quality and trying to improve research culture is a daunting task. It's a slow process. It takes sustained attention and focus and patience. But fundamentally, we'll get there if we implement sustained improvements in the way we do things day to day, the way we do things around here, and also to focus and reward on what we value and look carefully at what it is we value within our systems. So before I go into the activities themselves, I just wanted to jump maybe to the end and what we might aspire to in a sector sort of level. And that is a shift in what we value in our research outcomes. I think we expect from our institutions and from our researchers that they will push the boundaries of knowledge and communicate these through outputs of various sorts. Increasingly, we reward and expect researchers and institutions to provide benefits to society. But perhaps what we haven't elevated to the right level sufficiently is the value we place on the people, and not just on their satisfaction and well-being, which of course are crucial and important, but also how we support those people to develop output, societal impact, and all the other activities. How we value those who support the careers of others and create that sense of community within our organisations, but not just within our organisations, but also within the sector. So do funders reward as part of their funding mechanisms those that support the careers of others, and do we evaluate that as part of the assessment of the track record? But even beyond that, the case that we make to government, for example, for what it is that we are doing, we're absolutely valued for the knowledge that we create and the impact that we develop. But we should also be reporting to them on the skills that we develop, not only for the research system, but also for the economy at large. I'm taken by this quote from Ottoline from back in November, in which she says that she's taken by the notion of one's net contribution to research. So not just the research that one does, but also the research that one enables others to do. And that's the kind of system that we're trying to develop at Glasgow. So where did this plan for culture start? Well, it started from, I suppose, my position and looking outward to the sector as to how we were being encouraged to develop a better culture within the institution. And that typically takes the form of responding to various sector concordats or funder requirements or charters and so on. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with all of this, but improving our culture through these different strands is going to lead to, I think, fragmentation, because even if you optimized every single one of these strands, you wouldn't necessarily get that cohesive culture and supportive culture that we wish our researchers to experience. It's also the case that in many institutions, compliance with these various strands belongs to different parts of the institution. And so it was important for us to bring all of these strands together to develop a supportive culture. And so we're less interested, or rather, I'm less interested in this talk, to talk about the compliance mechanisms where we ensure that bad things don't happen, important and crucial though this is, but actually to create the culture in which we make good things more likely to happen. One thing that we did at Glasgow, which I think I would recommend to anyone embarking on this sort of plan, is to define quite precisely what is meant by research culture in your organisation or centre or team. And this has proven very helpful at Glasgow for focusing on what we're doing, for communicating what we're doing, and therefore getting support and buy-in from members of the community who also want to contribute to the culture of the organisation and of their local area. So we've defined a positive research culture as one in which colleagues are valued for their varied contributions to research. Okay, there are different types of research out there, and there are varied contributions that can be made to it. And that might mean contributions from different career stages, from different job families, from different backgrounds and sectors. And also those contributions may be different. Some people get the funding, some people do the stats. And if we want that community to come together and do more creative things collaboratively, we need to understand what the contributions are and ensure that those are valued. We also want to create an environment in which we support each other's careers, in which we share our expertise, our contacts, our networks, our opportunities, so that we create a well-developed, knowledgeable community. And also an environment that's supported to produce work that meets the highest standards of academic rigor. There's no point bringing people together and supporting each other if we're not also supporting them to produce work that stands a test of time and that the community can then build on. So the definition that we have is very tightly linked to the practice of doing research and how we work together in doing that research. And so what we talk about at Glasgow is that a better research culture is not an alternative to excellence, but it's what will enable more of us to excel. And we're very keen to emphasize in our communications that research culture is not that thing on the side. It's not the thing that you do on the side of doing research. It is actually the vehicle by which we ensure that good research is done and that as many people as possible can participate in their diverse ways in that good quality research. And we take a very action-oriented approach. At Glasgow, we're sort of light on policies and very light on making things mandatory, but instead put together a series of actions that translate, I suppose, our intent to actions on the ground in our community. So we've got a wee short video that we promote. We've also got a statement on research culture that explains what we've done, what we're going to do, and how we're going to measure progress. And we have a 5-year action plan to work through. So I'm not going to go through this slide in an awful lot of detail, but it's just to indicate that the pillars, I suppose, of activities that are included in our action plan, and also to illustrate that we did start this quite some time ago. It's still a work in progress, not everything works, but we did start back in 2015 and reviewing our research integrity provision, our training, our leadership structure, and just the awareness more generally of this really important aspect of research. We then moved on and embedded collegiality within our academic promotions criteria. And by collegiality, we mean supporting each other to succeed. We also signed up to the Researcher Careers Concordat and developed a 3-year action plan for that. And I've worked through that, and that has been particularly helpful actually over the course of the pandemic. So we were able to embed some of the principles and commitments there in our support mechanisms over the past year. We've then developed tools to support the fair evaluation of research in compliance with DORA and with the Leiden Manifesto, but also recognising different types of career paths. And we're now focusing more than we have been on emphasising the early and wide sharing of our research outcomes, methods, protocols, and so on. So rather than focusing on the actual actions, I'll focus on how we deliver those actions, because that's probably more generalizable to perhaps your areas. So we try to align them as much as possible. And we talk about supporting what we value, rewarding what we value, celebrating what we value, and then monitor how we're doing so that we can improve what we support, what we reward, and what we celebrate. So here's some specific examples of the things we've been put in place to support what we value. We've introduced specialist career tracks for individuals who are not following the traditional PI path, and that might mean technologists or bioinformaticians, statisticians, and research scientists more generally. We've embedded the credit taxonomy within our institutional outputs repository that allows it to be put on record what the contribution that someone has made to an output. We've developed tools for talking about outputs in ways that respect the principles of DORA, but also allow one to describe the significance of the work and the contribution to the field and not use unhelpful proxies. We have focused our attention on how PIs support our research-only staff as part of our implementation plan for the researcher careers concordat. We've explained what 10 days of CPD looks like. We've developed conversation starters to allow, again, those principles that we have for career support to be implemented on the ground. We've just recently completed a project with the International Network of Research Managers to actually probe what we actually value about career support. And as a result of those workshops, we've now made changes to our recruitment toolkit. We have a sort of 15-minute guide for hiring managers to consider matters of research integrity, of DORA, and also what sort of questions you might ask of an applicant for a job to inquire as to their commitment to supporting the careers of others. And we're also working to develop a community project on the narrative CV that will support our early career staff in particular to document their track record and do so by bringing out all the different aspects of research that we wish to reward them for. We have created a network of research integrity advisors across our disciplines who are there not to report on misconduct solely, but actually they are there for advice and for support and questions about research practice. And also, you know, we've put our money where our mouth is. We managed to secure quite a lot of money from Scottish Funding Council to support our recovery from COVID, and we used those funds to try and understand what the differential impact was of COVID on careers, and also to use those funds to support those projects and careers. In terms of rewarding what we value, I'm going to focus here on our academic promotions. At Glasgow, research is assessed across 7 dimensions, so the sort of things you might expect: your outputs, impact, you know, your service to the community. But progression is preponderance-based. And what this means is that you need only meet the criteria for 4 of those dimensions in order to progress. And that allows a sort of team-based, I suppose, structure in that not everybody needs to do everything, but collectively we have all of the bases covered that we expect to be covered in research. Now, a year ago, we updated our academic promotions criteria. And one of the things that we did is that we applied parity of credit for outputs and impact. And what that meant was that of the 4 dimensions that an applicant needed to meet the criteria for, one of those dimensions should be either outputs or impact, thereby putting these 2 dimensions on a par with each other. We've also embedded within the academic promotions criteria the reward for those who support careers and introduced a requirement to demonstrate collegiality. And we gave examples of what we meant. Okay, there were specific things like including a more junior colleague as a collaborator on a funding bid, supporting others to be nominated, for example, for community service or for prizes or other forms of peer-to-peer recognition, or acting in second supervisory capacity where a junior colleague is the primary supervisor. We also, wherever we can, ask researchers to document their research activity by using a combination of quantitative evidence, but also a narrative. The narrative allowing the individual to explain how they went about doing something, any issues that arose in that context, and anything else they wish to include so that anyone evaluating that research performance has the appropriate context. We also require commitment to open research practices. and focus, as per our university's research strategy, on importance of quality over quantity. So we're not counting the number of publications, we're only asking individuals to highlight their best small number of outputs and then narrate in a short number of sentences what the significance of that piece of work was. And here's an example of where these things come together in our internal fellowship application forms. So we ask applicants to list the 4 most significant publications. We ask them to document the influence the output has made and what their contribution was to it. And then we also ask for the commitment to open research. This scheme has been running for several years now, and so our applicants are used to sort of these documenting their track record in this way. In terms of celebrating what we value, we have been running our Research Culture Awards annually for 3 years now. It recognises individuals or teams from any job family or career stage who improve culture in their area or in their university or in their discipline. And I want to emphasise here that this is not an award for being nice to each other, which I hope we all sort of strive to do, but actually taking practical steps to further the careers of colleagues and to improve culture. In terms of measuring how we're doing, we introduced a relatively short survey a couple of years ago, and that helped us to identify which areas we wished to focus on. And we will be running it again this year to figure out how we have been doing. Here's just an example of some of the results that came out. The rows are the questions and the columns are our various departments. And if I can just highlight 2 separate departments within the university, the one on the left that's got more blue in it, there were more favourable responses, and the one in red had less favourable responses. But just to say, it's quite difficult to have a single culture and a single understanding across the institution. You need to really consider what is relevant discipline by discipline. And then if you look at some of the example questions in rows, there are some, like authorship practice, that seem to be well understood across the institution, and others, such as valuing the quality of outputs over quantity, is still something we need to work on embedding across the institution. And just one other data slide, we also asked what people knew about and what they wished to know about. And these bars in green indicate the parts of our activity that our researchers were very familiar with, and that's quite good because these are areas like open access, data management, ORCID's integrity that we've invested a lot of time and effort, both in the expertise and support, but also in the comms. And then there are areas that we needed to work more on and that our researchers wanted more information on. So how quality is assessed in each discipline and how to write a good publication or output. So in terms of reflecting on how we went about this and what I would recommend to others, as I said at the start, defining what we mean by culture has been incredibly useful for focusing attention and action. To be consistent in what you're implementing and aligning the actions so that they can be clearly understood and reinforce each other. I suppose reflect on whether you're solving the specific problem versus the underlying causes, and I think Ottiline touched on this earlier as well. There's a whole sort of community and environment and system that sometimes can support the resolution of the specific problem. It doesn't have to be a long-term plan all laid out. Things take time and opportunities come around. The important thing is to get started in doing something and to continue to communicate with the researchers as to the intention and the activities that are taking place so that they can also initiate local activities. Make things easy. So we have gone down the route in several of our areas of producing conversation starters, just 10 things to kickstart the conversation. And that helps bring some of our policies right down to the level of the implementation. What can an individual do tomorrow to support some of the priorities that we've set? Consider pilot exercises. They're very good for testing the water, for refining some of the interventions that you will then want to maybe scale up or widen out to other disciplines or areas. But most importantly, just to do something, because every act that we make is a chance to influence the way that others think and behave. Just a few thoughts really on the COVID recovery specifically, because this is an example of where opportunities have arisen for improving culture, improving support, and improving the quality of research. And I'll just sort of go through these. Remote working has meant less hands-on supervision or peer-peer support. And so there are, I guess, opportunities for intervention there in supporting, local understanding of what good quality is and how people can progress their projects. International projects have been affected, and changes in the way that those projects are being developed will also provide an opportunity, for example, for switching to capacity building mode. Where projects have been halted or disrupted and need to be recommenced or changed, again, there are opportunities there to ensure that they are recommenced efficiently, but also with integrity. And let's not neglect the needs of professional services staff who are supporting the researchers and the skills that they will require in order to support researchers to recommence. And the recovery has also an opportunity to do an audit of our skills, whether that's the researcher skills or the managerial skills, for example, in managing remote teams. And I think we've all learned an awful lot about how to deliver training in this sort of environment, but also the importance of communication, but also the ease with which we can communicate. In terms of implementation, one of the things that we've done here at Glasgow is launched a lab for academic culture. So this was launched just in December last year, and we've taken culture beyond just the realm of research, but into sort of academia more generally. The lab has 3 aims. It's a home for all of the culture-related projects, bringing together all of those different strands that tend to sort of sit separately otherwise. It's where we monitor and evaluate progress in what we're doing, but also it's where we work with the sector and interact with our peers and with funders, because while there are lots of things that we can do ourselves, as I think I've illustrated, there are many other things that we can only do by working in the sector and working in coordination with other institutions. We deliver our projects through secondment, and that might be from other professional services staff, but also from researchers. And again, showing that there is an opportunity there for our researchers to experience new working environments and a chance to apply their skills. And if you have ideas and you would like to work with us, then please just drop a line. We're there for this. And also during lockdown, we published our new research strategy, and we have put culture at the heart of that. Of course, it's a fantastic opportunity for us to get attention for our culture work and help in its delivery. Thank you.
Tanita, thank you very much. That's fascinating and great to see what in-depth long-term work that Glasgow has been doing, but also that it's full up. It's good that long-term work comprises of discrete actions, and therefore there's a degree of modularity and I think scalability. Now we've got some time for questions, and one question that came in, which I think is relevant to what I just said, is the work, and Anonymous Denny said, the work you're doing looks fantastic. Would you say it's a resource-intensive process, or achieve something that's achievable for any institution, whatever their size?
Yes, I would say not really that resource-intensive. So one of the things that we've done at Glasgow is we haven't really made any appointments with research culture in the title. You know what I mean? So basically, we evolved all of our activities from effectively the work that we were doing to support research quality. We have very recently made a couple of appointments, one of them specifically linked to the Careers Concordat, and also one specifically linked to integrity and researcher development. So I would not say it's very resource intensive. I think it's a leadership challenge like nothing else, I think, because what you're really doing is trying to pull together all the different components of professional services delivery, but also academic leadership together, you know, to basically unite behind a common ambition. And that's the tricky part, you know, is how to get attention, how to make it a priority. Now, a lot of the initiatives, you know, they're at different scales. A fellowship scheme, for example, costs a lot of money, but chances are some organizations are running this already. So you can almost appropriate some of the projects that are already happening, tweak them a bit and make them work for culture. Others require a lot of political leverage. So changing academic promotions criteria doesn't happen every day. It shouldn't happen every day, but it's not always possible for everyone to make that happen. But all the things in between, the training, the conversation starters, the groups to sort of discuss what's needed, the surveys, these are not that research intensive. And you know, we've been doing it for quite a while, so presented collectively, there's quite a lot there. But each of them individually, I wouldn't say involves a lot of time, involves some time.
Thank you. Anonymous questions. You touched on differences between departments in the survey. Are different activities taking place at the discipline level, or are most of the activities applicable across the board? And also some activities rolled out stemming from sort of local initiatives in departments and faculty and schools, or is it quite centrally led?
Yes. To us, it was because our culture work was I suppose there was central direction for it. It was important for us when we defined those three ambitions that they worked across the institution. Okay, so they weren't set so narrowly that they meant an awful lot in some areas, perhaps when some of those issues were most important, but they were relevant and they were sort of set that way on purpose. However, what sits beneath that are a series of actions that happen differentially in different parts of the institution, right, where they're most relevant. So to give you an example of that, the Careers Concordat has its own principles. We have our own action plan, but actually one of our academic colleges has created its own Concordat group, and they focus on and pilot activities that are relevant to the career structure needs of that particular discipline. And when it comes to our only staff, that's quite important, because the career pyramid in a STEM subject will be different to that in our arts and humanities. And so one solution institutionally would not work there, but they know that the support and expertise and direction is there, and so take that locally. Another example is specific to integrity, where I think, you know, the language we use and the pressures we were under in 2015 as a sector were very, I think, focused on the STEM areas. And so it would have been quite easy for, say, the arts and humanities to go, that's nothing to do with us. But as it happened, you know, because of our leadership structure around integrity, the champion for that college developed their own articulation of what integrity meant in the arts. And that meant that the intent of the institution was translated locally by a local academic leader to be relevant to that area. And that will help improve research practice in that area without there having been institutional specific activities that were leading to that.
Thank you. A question from Anila. For academics, how can they best be trained, inducted and developed in their roles? You know, what, rather than leaving people to sort of pick things up as they go along, what kind of tips, tricks and induction and development activities do you think are essential these days?
I think induction needs to work at different levels. So there needs to be, so what we risk, I think, is that when induction is very local, you basically end up picking whatever the local culture happens to be. And I think one of the challenges, well, you know, or one of the interesting parts, I think, of this sort of activity is that it needs to sit, there needs to be an overall university expectations and then implemented locally in alignment with that. And so I think the most important thing I think around induction is that the institutional expectations are absolutely clearly communicated, but then they are cascaded locally so that local initiatives are ready as well. So it's quite important, for example, that new individuals coming in from different institutions, but also different fields, you know, since a lot of people are moving between fields or even between sectors, get that induction at the outset so that, for example, we do not assume that, for example, experimental practices are known, even the more basic ones, and we ensure not just induction, but also as part of that induction, create a space where individuals can say what they don't know and then support them reactively to that.
Thank you. Two related questions. Karen says that your work's fantastic to see. Did you face any resistance and where? And an anonymous question asks, what any advice if you have an HR department that kind of refuses to acknowledge that research culture issues are something that they should be interested in, and that sort of HR structures and processes can influence this stuff?
Mm-hmm. Okay, on the first of those, in terms of how this work was received, I think it's broadly been received very well, but I would say that a lot of the initiatives that we led on, the big stuff like the academic promotions criteria, was developed through, I think, a lot of contact with our community. And I don't just mean consultation. I mean, we undertook a review of each of our disciplines, try and identify what makes a good output in that discipline, what makes a good impact in that discipline, what makes a good environment in that discipline, to try and get that discipline level understanding of quality. And in the course of those discussions and consultations, we would ask, you know, what would make Glasgow the best place, you know, to develop a career? And what we would hear back is, we don't like this individualistic culture. You know, we are naturally well disposed towards others. How do we reward that? So when we went back then with collegiality, it wasn't a huge departure from what they were saying, what we'd heard. We were simply sort of reflecting that back. And I think for others working on this, you know, don't start with maybe your biggest problem. Start with where you're able to take the community to, and then you won't face, you know, face resistance. The second one, talking of resistance, around departments that won't play ball. We all have those, and you sometimes you have to just choose a different route. And I sort of feel that there are, in choosing what you do, think very carefully as to who your delivery partners are, and do what you can do with them, as opposed to doing your favorite project with collaborators who don't see the point. And think, you know, this is a slow process, and if people do not join in at the beginning, that doesn't mean that they won't join in halfway through or even towards the end. So I do not have the perfect answer to that question, and that's not because I haven't experienced it, but just because you just need to be pragmatic.
Thank you. One final question from Alexander. Have you managed to prove that investing in your research culture has produced quote unquote better research, or is this something that can't be measured? And I think as well as better research, what about impact on, you know, well-being, productivity, job satisfaction, all those other things were an important part of the culture?
Yeah. I mean, when I say research, I do mean everything, you know, to do with research, and that obviously includes impact on. I suppose our culture survey will tell us as to whether some of those aspects are working in terms of the process. You know, are people aware of the support structures? Are they aware of the expertise that we have and the expectations? But also, do they feel that their local environment is supportive? For example, around giving feedback on grant applications, giving feedback on outputs. Do they feel that this whole discussion that we've been having about quality over quantity, is that being implemented locally? And do they feel that it's happening on the ground? So this will give us, I think, a lot of material to tell us whether the approaches that we're using are the right ones, and whether the local communities are embracing and believing what we're trying to do.
Fascinating. Thank you so much. I think we'll draw to a close now. Now, I appreciate lots of unanswered questions on this. Your presentation generated a lot of very positive feedback, an awful lot of interesting discussion. Now, just so, as you and I have discussed previously, UKRA is very interested in the work that Glasgow has been done and wants to look at how we can kind of take this to a wider audience. So we're going to sort of save all the questions that have been asked during the session that we haven't had time to answer, and we will look at how we can follow those up through other means. And indeed, that's going to be the case with any questions that are raised today. One of the things I like about virtual as opposed to an in-person event is that you can see in an in-person event, you can see people waiting and wanting to ask questions, but you have no idea what those questions are unless they get the microphone. And in a format like this, we can see the issues that matter to people, the topics on which they'd like more information. So we will be working with our speakers to see what we can do to provide you with those answers. Tanita, thank you so much for your presentation today. It was fascinating to hear from you and learn about more about your work and that of your colleagues. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve.